Today, we're tackling something that's, well, it's really complex and incredibly sensitive. We're going to talk about the experience of people who feel like they're being targeted by forces that nobody else can see, something often called electronic harassment. And that really brings up a huge question, doesn't it? What happens when a threat feels completely 100% real to you, but no one else can see it? It's a journey into a personal reality that's got to be isolating, terrifying, and just deeply misunderstood. So yeah, let's get into it. So here's how we're going to walk through this. First, we'll look at the unseen threat itself. Then we'll talk about how the mind reacts, how it goes on high alert. After that, we'll see how someone starts connecting the dots to build a story. Then we'll cover the world of misunderstanding that opens up, and finally, we'll get to the really serious part, how this can go from stigma to actual danger.
All right, so where does an experience like this even start? It really begins with a powerful internal belief, a deep conviction that you're being targeted by some kind of remote, invisible force.
One of the key ideas that comes up here is something called the microwave hearing effect. Now, what is that? It's the perception of hearing sounds or even voices that a person believes are being, well, beamed directly into their head. You can imagine. An experience like that would feel incredibly real, totally invasive, and it's easy to see how it could be interpreted as a form of remote psychological torture. Okay, now just try to imagine that for a second. If that was your reality, how would your mind react? It's probably no surprise that it would go on complete high alert, right? And that's the pivot. We move from this perceived threat on the outside to a really powerful psychological reaction on the inside. And this kicks off a kind of chain reaction. It all starts with that feeling of remote torture. That leads to a state we call hypervigilance. And once your mind is in that high alert mode, it starts desperately searching for patterns, and it starts interpreting totally normal, everyday things as part of some big, coordinated harassment campaign, what some people call gang stalking. So what even is hypervigilance? Think of it like your internal alarm system being stuck in the on position. You're constantly on guard, your senses are cranked up to 11, just scanning for danger everywhere. It's actually a pretty common symptom for trauma survivors, and it totally rewires how you see and experience the world. Okay, so you're in this state of high alert. How does that turn into a full-blown story? Well, when your brain is that revved up, its number one job is to make sense of the threat. It becomes a pattern-seeking machine. It starts connecting dots, even when there's actually no line between them. And this right here, this is the crucial shift. Suddenly, a car that drives past your house twice? Not a coincidence. A stranger looking in your direction for a second too long? They're part of it. Two people happen to be wearing a red shirt? It's a signal. All these random, ordinary things, they stop being random. They become proof, evidence of this huge, coordinated, malicious campaign aimed right at you. And this naturally leads to what might be the hardest part of this whole experience. It's this massive collision, this disconnect between what someone is feeling on the inside and how the rest of the world sees them on the outside. And this is so, so important to understand. No matter what anyone else thinks, for the person living it, the threat is real. The stalking is real. The harassment is real. It all feels 100% unquestionably true.
So you end up with these two totally different realities playing out at the same time. Internally, the person feels like they're in a fight for their life, defending themselves against a hidden enemy. But externally, what do other people see? They might just see behavior that looks strange or paranoid. And that gap, that huge chasm in understanding, that's what leads to this really deep, painful social isolation.
Now, if we look at this from a clinical perspective, many mental health professionals might see these beliefs as possible symptoms of an underlying condition. And, you can see how that interpretation, while coming from a place of trying to help, could make it even harder for the person to feel like anyone truly gets what they're going through. And this is where things can take a really dangerous turn. We've talked about misunderstanding, but what happens when that misunderstanding hardens into actual stigma? Well, that's when the danger stops being just a perception and becomes very, very real. Think about it. When someone is labeled as weird or paranoid, they often end up totally isolated. And that isolation, combined with the stigma, it's tragic, but it can make them a perfect target for people who are actually looking to exploit or harm someone vulnerable. And this is the really stark warning here. People who are seen as having a mental health issue or disability can become targets for real harassment, real discrimination, and even hate crimes. It's a horrible, twisted irony, isn't it? The very thing they feared, being targeted, can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, all because of how others react to them. So after all this, what do we do? What's the takeaway? Well, the guidance really points in two directions. For anyone who's struggling with experiences like these, reaching out to mental health professionals for support is absolutely key. And for the rest of us, as a community, we have to be vigilant. If you see an actual hate crime or discrimination happening, it's so important to report it to the authorities. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. This really goes beyond just one specific phenomenon, you know? It's about empathy. It's a challenge to all of us. How can we build a bridge of understanding to support people whose reality is just fundamentally different from our own? How do we close that gap between what one person experiences and what another person sees, so that misunderstanding doesn't spiral into real harm?